For 2000 years, organized religion has fed you a convenient lie about the cross. They turned a profound map of human consciousness into a dead wooden symbol of suffering, guilt, and death. I tell you, the cross is not a symbol. It is the exact intersection where your horizontal mind of time meets the vertical dimension of pure awareness. What they called a bloody execution was actually Jesus revealing the ultimate secret of inner alchemy, the death of the ego and the birth of the divine. You have been looking at a dead piece of wood while missing the living reality inside your own brain. Hello, my beloved friends. Sit with me for a moment. Put aside all your daily worries, all the hurry and bustle of your mind, and just be here with me, present in this very moment. For 2000 years, you have been told a massive lie. You have been told that the cross is merely a symbol, a piece of wood to hang around your neck, a monument to put on top of a stone church, a representation of sacrifice, pain, and heavy guilt. The priests, the theologians, the organized churches have taken something that was meant to be an explosive, revolutionary key for your inner awakening, and they have turned it into an idol of consolation. They transformed a living fire into cold, dead stone. I tell you, the cross is not a symbol. It was never meant to be an ornament, nor was it meant to make you feel like a guilty sinner who must bow down in fear and trembling. The cross is an existential event. It is the ultimate inner friction. It is the sharp sword that cuts asunder that which belongs to the earth and that which belongs to the divine. Jesus was not a politician, nor was he trying to found a new religion called Christianity. He was a master of inner alchemy, a radical revolutionary of consciousness. But the society could not tolerate him. The politicians became terrified of him, and the priests became furious because he was taking away the very foundation of their exploitation. To understand Jesus, to decode what has been hidden from you for centuries, you must first understand a dimension of human relationship that has completely disappeared from the modern world. Human relationships have changed drastically, and they have changed for the worse. In all dimensions, the deeper relationships have vanished. The wife is no longer a wife, but just a girlfriend. The husband is no longer a husband, but just a boyfriend. Outer friendship is pleasant, but it remains on the surface. Marriage used to be a commitment in depth, a jump into the unknown. But modern man is terrified of depth. On the surface, you can function like an efficient automaton. No awareness is required. But the deeper you penetrate into love, into intimacy, the more alert you have to be. because at every moment the ego feels threatened with death. Fear of depth has created a juvenile, shallow culture. You touch each other's bodies, you exchange physical sexuality, and then you separate. Bodies meet, but the inner self remains entirely untouched. And the greatest relationship that ever existed on this earth has been completely wiped out. That is the relationship between a master and a disciple. You will never be able to understand Jesus, Buddha, or Lao Tzu if you cannot comprehend the sacred dimension of trust that exists between a master and his disciple. Today, that grand relationship has been substituted by a very sickly, pathological alternative: the relationship between a psychiatrist and his patient. A patient goes to a psychiatrist not in search of truth, not in search of health in its true sense. Look at the word health. It comes from the same root as whole and holy. To be healthy means to be whole, to be centered in your ultimate core. But a patient does not go to a psychiatrist to become whole. He goes merely to get rid of a painful symptom, to be forced back into what the culture calls normal. But what is your normal human being? Normalcy in this insane world is nothing but normal pathology, normal madness. The normal man is just as insane as the man in the asylum, except that his madness remains within the socially accepted boundaries. When someone trespasses those boundaries, society calls him sick and sends him to the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist exists on the border to repair the broken piece and shove the individual back into the collective crowd. A psychiatrist can never be a master because he himself is deeply ill, uncentered, and blind to the spiritual reality. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, they were geniuses of intellect, but utterly blind regarding the ultimate self. Whenever anyone mentioned death in front of Freud, he would begin to tremble uncontrollably. On 2 occasions, when discussing Egyptian mummies and death with Carl Jung, Freud actually fainted and fell off his chair in pure terror. If death created such neurotic dread in the founder of psychoanalysis, what could he possibly offer to his disciples? Can you imagine a Buddha fainting out of fear when death is mentioned? A Buddha smiles at death because he has known that which is deathless within himself. Carl Jung confessed in his memoirs that he desperately wanted to visit Rome to see the Vatican Library, where the secret esoteric records of ancient religions are stored. Yet every time he went to the train station to buy a ticket to Rome, he began to tremble with anxiety and canceled the trip. He tried several times throughout his life and finally gave up, admitting he could not face going to Rome. Why was one of the greatest minds of modern psychology terrified of visiting Rome? Because Rome symbolized the ancient, vast spiritual systems of the past that had fallen into ruins. Deep down, Jung's mind was terrified that if he stood amidst the ruins of great ancient systems, his own small, artificially constructed psychological philosophy would crumble into dust. If these acclaimed leaders of Western psychology were so terrified of death and spiritual ruins, how can psychiatry replace the temple? It cannot. A psychiatrist can at best be a repairman for a broken mind, but he cannot bring you to wholeness. If you come to a master as a patient looking for a quick psychological cure, you will miss him entirely. A master is not concerned with treating your peripheral anxieties. He is concerned with you, with your being. Your diseases exist on the surface because you have been hiding from yourself, avoiding the fundamental encounter with your own inner reality. Why are you so afraid to look within? What has happened to you? Since your early childhood, you were never accepted as you were. You were born innocent, whole, and wild. But your parents, your teachers, your priests, and your society could not accept your natural state. They began to force you, discipline you, cut off your natural impulses, and condemn your innate emotions. They accepted only tiny fragments of your behavior, those fragments that were obedient and useful to the established order. The rest of your natural self, your anger, your wild joy, your natural sexuality, your deep doubts had to be suppressed, denied, and forced into the dark dungeons of the unconscious. You live in fear of encountering yourself because you know that if you drop your guard, all those repressed, denied parts of your soul will rise up again. Unless a human being is ready to expose his entire being to himself, without judgment, without condemnation, he cannot become a disciple. A master is simply a spiritual midwife. He helps you pass through the agony and ecstasy of a second birth, to be born anew out of your own inner virginity. And what is the bridge between a master and a disciple? It is absolute trust. In this modern era, you have been trained for 300 years to doubt, to argue, to be skeptical, to fight, and to build an impenetrable armor around your ego. Science grows through doubt, logic functions through skepticism. Science has performed visible material miracles. It has given you comfortable houses, fast cars, and incredible technology. But it has completely destroyed human happiness. The more technology you have, the less you are needed as a conscious human being. The computer replaces your mind, machines replace your hands, and you are left feeling futile, meaningless, and disposable. Happiness comes from being needed by existence. In ancient times, when a mystic looked up at the stars, he felt that the entire cosmos was breathing with him, that even God needed his love and his prayer. But modern technology has rendered man an out-of-date model, an unnecessary burden on the planet. Amidst millions of shiny new devices, man is the only obsolete creature. This is why modern humanity suffers from an agonizing existential boredom and meaninglessness. Science cannot produce a Buddha, a Jesus, or a Lao Tzu. It can only build a world where a Buddha becomes almost impossible to recognize. Yet, the divine dimension is not gone. It is merely hidden behind your closed, doubting eyes. If you are finding value in this deep exploration of truth, take a small moment right now to like this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to this channel. Your simple interaction helps spread these sacred teachings to thousands of seeking souls around the world. And for those among you who feel a deep calling to support this work further, to help us continue bringing these rare spiritual insights into the light, I invite you to click the join button to become a channel member, send a super thanks, or explore our collection of ebooks linked in the description. Your generosity becomes a direct vehicle for expanding consciousness across the globe. To recognize a Jesus, to hear the cosmic melody that flows through an awakened master, you need aristocratically trained spiritual ears and trusting eyes. Trust is blind to the outer world, just as love is blind, but it possesses an extraordinary inner sight. When you close your two physical eyes in total trust, the life energy that usually flows outward toward material objects has nowhere to go. It turns around. It undergoes a radical conversion, flowing backward into your inner source and striking the third eye. The third eye is not a physical organ. It is the inward orientation of your life force. It is only through that third eye that a Jesus is recognized, that a Buddha is realized. When Jesus walked the earth, the scholars, the university professors, the wealthy priests, and the high officials completely missed him. They looked at him and saw only Joseph, the carpenter's son. They laughed and said, "How can this uneducated youth from Nazareth be the Son of God?" They were so filled with intellect, ego, and theological knowledge that they were completely deaf to the divine music standing right in front of them. Who were the few who recognized Jesus? They were the most ordinary of ordinaries, a fisherman, a humble farmer, a shoemaker, a tax collector, a prostitute. Why could these simple people recognize the divine while the learned scholars failed? Because ordinary, uneducated people possess a rare, precious quality: humbleness and trust. A farmer sows seeds in the dark earth and waits in deep trust for the rain and the sun. He lives with mountains, trees, clouds, and rivers. Trees are not cunning, they do not wear masks. Hills are not politicians, they do not plot against you. When you walk into the deep forest or stand before the vast ocean, you suddenly feel a surge of unutterable joy. That joy does not come from the trees. It comes from within you, because in nature there is no threat, and for a moment you allow your heavy mental armor to fall away. Jesus walked up to the shores of the Sea of Galilee early one morning. Two fishermen, Andrew and Peter, were casting their nets into the water. Jesus looked at them and said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Why are you wasting your precious life catching fish? If Jesus came to your office or your shop today and said that to you, you would call the police or tell him to stop wasting your valuable time. But those two simple fishermen looked into the eyes of Jesus. The morning sun was rising behind him, but his eyes were deeper than the lake, and his inner radiance was brighter than the sun. Without asking a single logical question, without demanding a credential or a proof, they dropped their nets on the shore and followed him. That is trust. Trust means not looking back. A doubting mind is continuously looking over its shoulder, weighing alternatives, asking, "Did I make a mistake? Is this man really a savior or just a madman?" But trust moves forward like a mighty river, never looking back. Now, let us enter into the extraordinary, secret sayings of Jesus recorded in the ancient Gospel of Thomas. Listen with your heart, not with your analytical head. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like." Notice the exquisite quality of their question. They were not asking out of intellectual curiosity. They were not trying to debate or test his knowledge. Their question was completely innocent. A question is innocent only when you do not already possess a hidden answer in your mind. If you ask me, "Does God exist?" and deep down you are a believer looking for confirmation, or an atheist looking to refute my words, your question is polluted. You are not empty enough to receive the truth. You are already poisoned by your own concepts. The disciples asked because they knew that they did not know. When you realize your own utter ignorance, you become humble. When you are empty, you are thirsty for water, hungry for bread, and open to receive. A true disciple comes to the Master as an absolute emptiness. They asked, "Tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like." They did not ask what the kingdom of heaven is. That would have been an impossible question. The ultimate reality cannot be expressed directly in human language. The moment you speak the ultimate truth, it becomes a lie, because words belong to the finite world of time, while truth belongs to the infinite timelessness. Therefore, all great mystics use parables, allegories, myths, and metaphors. Myth means explaining that which you do not know in terms of that which you do know, explaining the unknown through the known. When a blind man asks you what light is, how can you explain light to him? Light cannot be touched, tasted, or heard. If you say light is like warmth or light is like music, you are using a parable. The parable is a finger pointing to the moon. A fool analyzes the finger, dissects the arrow on the signpost, and says, "I see no moon here." But the trusting seeker looks in the direction the finger is pointing and beholds the glowing moon in the sky. Jesus answered their innocent question with a masterpiece of spiritual metaphor. Jesus said to them, "It is like a mustard seed smaller than all seeds, but when it falls on the tilled earth, it produces a large tree and becomes shelter for all the birds of heaven." Why did Jesus choose the mustard seed? For several profound reasons. First, the mustard seed is the smallest visible seed known to the farmer. God is unmanifest, invisible, smaller than the smallest particle. At the absolute boundary of human sight sits the mustard seed. Beyond it lies the invisible, subtle realm. Furthermore, the mustard seed contains a thrilling existential paradox. It is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows in proper soil, it becomes the largest of all garden plants. God is the invisible seed, and this vast, expanding universe is the fully grown tree. God is the unmanifest source. The cosmos is the manifest flowering. If you take a sharp knife and dissect a tiny mustard seed under a microscope, will you find the majestic branches, the green leaves, the fragrant flowers, and the birds nesting in its shade? No. You will find only chemical molecules. You can declare triumphantly, "There is no tree hidden in this seed. It was all an illusion." That is precisely what modern analytical scientists have been doing with life. They dissect a beautiful rose in a laboratory, categorize its chemical elements into separate bottles, and announce, "There is no such thing as beauty or soul in this flower. It is merely a combination of carbon, nitrogen, and water." They miss the whole because they analyze the parts: truth, beauty, love, and God can never be found through analysis. They exist only in their ultimate wholeness. A grand symphony is not merely a collection of individual acoustic noises. When the notes merge in perfect harmony, a divine presence manifests that was entirely absent in the individual notes. The mustard seed contains the majestic tree, but the tree can manifest only under one condition. The seed must be willing to fall onto tilled earth and die. This is the absolute core of the forbidden decoding. God has dissolved himself into this universe. He is not a separate carpenter sitting up in the clouds on a golden throne, watching the world he made from a distance. No, God is like the seed that has completely surrendered its individual boundary, dissolved its hard shell into the moist soil, and transformed into the living tree. God is lost in this existence. He is pulsating in every leaf, flowering in every blossom, flowing in every river, and breathing in your very lungs. If you want to find God, you cannot find him as a separate person sitting in Mecca, Kashi, Jerusalem, or Rome. You can find him only when you, the individual seed, are ready to fall onto the tilled earth and die. As long as you maintain your tight, rigid ego, as long as the seed boasts, "I am an independent entity, I must protect my shell, I am afraid of dissolving," you remain a prison to yourself. The shell that was meant to protect the life force until it found the soil becomes a suffocating tomb, and the tree dies unexpressed within the seed. A Buddha, a Jesus, a Krishna, these are mustard seeds that had the incredible courage to fall into the soil, to lose their identity, to die as individuals, so that the divine tree could sprout through them. When Joseph's carpenter's son died on the inner cross of surrender, Christ was born. When Jesus says that the mustard seed must fall on tilled earth, he is speaking directly to you about the necessity of becoming a disciple. What is a disciple? A disciple is a seeker who allows his inner soil to be tilled, cultivated, and prepared by a master. Left to yourself, you throw your spiritual seeds onto hard rocks, onto dusty concrete roads where passers-by trample them, or into thorny bushes where they are choked. You need a spiritual gardener, a master, who can pull out your weeds, fertilize your soil with love and awareness, and protect the fragile green sprout when it first breaks through the dark earth. The newborn sprout of consciousness is so delicate that any harsh wind of doubt or condemnation can destroy it. Faith is absurd to the logical mind. The seed can never see the future tree. How can the seed be logically certain that if it allows itself to rot, disintegrate, and vanish into the dark soil, a glorious green tree will rise up toward the sun? There is no logical guarantee whatsoever. If the seed demands a guarantee before it agrees to fall, it will remain a hard, dead seed forever. Faith means jumping into the unknown without any guarantee, trusting solely in the call of the divine. When your inner seed dies in total trust, the individual drops away, and suddenly the majestic tree of cosmic consciousness sprouts forth. And when your tree grows into its full Buddha flowering, it becomes a shelter for all the birds of heaven. Millions of seeking souls, wandering in the burning desert of this material world, will come and find cool shade, rest, and shelter under your branches. They will feel the divine pulse throbbing through you. They will taste the sweet fruit of your silence and be inspired to take the ultimate jump themselves. You are the kingdom of heaven. You are that tiny, potent mustard seed. Prepare yourself for the ultimate death of your ego. Naturally, your mind will tremble. Fear and anxiety will grip your heart as you stand on the edge of the precipice, looking down into the bottomless abyss. The seed knows only its own small boundary. It cannot imagine the vastness of the tree. Many times you will run to the edge of surrender, look down into the void, panic, and retreat into your old, comfortable misery. But I tell you, gather your courage. Allow your false identity, your pride, your intellectual cleverness, and your heavy ego to dissolve into the ground. Become the tilled earth. Become humble, simple, and empty. And when that seed vanishes into the soil, you will discover that you were never the tiny seed to begin with. You are the infinite, eternal tree of life, offering shelter, love, and shelter to all the birds of heaven. Now, let us move deeper into the second highly paradoxical saying of Jesus. Listen carefully, because these words will shatter all your comfortable, conventional notions of religion. Jesus said, "Men possibly think that I have come to throw peace upon the world, and they do not know that I have come to throw divisions upon the earth, fire, sword, war. For there shall be 5 in a house, 3 shall be against 2, and 2 against 3. the Father against the Son, and the Son against the Father, and they will stand as solitaries. Jesus said, I will give you what the eye has not seen, and what the ear has not heard, and what the hand has not touched, and what has not arisen in the heart of man. What a startling, shocking statement from a man who is worshipped as the Prince of Peace. I have come not to throw peace, but fire, sword, war. To understand this profound paradox, you must first distinguish between two radically different kinds of peace. The first kind of peace is the peace of the graveyard. If everyone in a town is completely dead, numb, unconscious, and paralyzed, there will be no arguments, no fights, no crime, and no war. But that silence is the silence of death, not of life. It is utterly worthless. A corpse never falls ill, but that does not mean a corpse possesses vibrant health. Many so-called religious teachers and moralists offer you this cheap plastic peace. They act as psychological tranquilizers. They console you in your sleeping state, teach you how to adjust to your miserable circumstances, and make you comfortable in your spiritual grave. Jesus is not a tranquilizer. He has not come to give you a cheap sleeping pill peace. He has come to disturb your sleep, to shake you out of your comfortable hypnosis, to destroy your false consolations. The second kind of peace is the vibrant, alive, crystal clear silence that arises when you are fully awake, centered in your innermost being, and radiant with self-knowledge. But to reach that ultimate peace, you must first pass through an intense inner war. War is bad when projected outward onto others. Violence and hatred are evil when unleashed upon the world. But why do human beings continuously fight wars on the outside? Because they have failed to fight the real war within themselves. When you are inwardly divided, tense, and at war with your own nature, you accumulate an immense amount of toxic, garbage energy inside. You cannot bear the pain of your own inner conflict, so you look for a trick to project it outward. You search for an excuse, a political ideology, a religious difference, a domestic argument to throw your inner toxicity onto your neighbor, your spouse, your child, or an enemy nation. Through violence, you experience a temporary catharsis, a brief relief. But because the inner source of your conflict remains untouched, the garbage accumulates again, and tomorrow you will need another war, another argument, another outburst of anger. In India, we call a fully awakened soul a Mahavira, which means the great conqueror. Yet Mahavira never held a weapon, never fought an army, and never practiced violence against a single living creature. Why is he called the great conqueror? Because he conquered his own inner unconsciousness. He fought the inner battle, dissolved his internal division, and integrated his energy into an unbreakable oneness. When you conquer yourself, all outward fighting ceases completely because there is no longer any internal garbage to project onto others. Outward conflict is merely a coward's trick to avoid facing the painful inner war. Why is facing the inner war so painful? Because every one of you maintains a highly polished, false image of being a good, noble, and moral human being. Psychiatrists know that human beings need illusions to survive in their unawakened state. If the raw truth of your unconscious mind, your repressed lust, your hidden hatred, your greed, your cruelty were suddenly exposed to you without any preparation, you would collapse in total self-condemnation and commit suicide.
To avoid seeing your own ugly reality, your mind chooses the path of least resistance.
Instead of undergoing the arduous, painful alchemy of inner transformation, the mind chooses a cheap shortcut. It creates a beautiful illusion. You simply convince yourself that you are good, noble, heavenly, and innocent, while all the evil belongs to the other person. This illusion gives you a false sense of center, an artificial confidence. That artificial center is the ego. Life has no shortcuts. Real transformation demands that you go through the fire. Look at the word devil. Do you know where it comes from? It comes from the exact same Sanskrit root as the word divine, deva. The devil and the divine are not two separate cosmic enemies fighting in the sky. They are the two poles of the very same energy. When your life energy is sour, unconscious, and fragmented, it acts as the devil. When that very same energy is purified, integrated, and illuminated through awareness, it reveals itself as the divine. The bitter, poisonous root can flower into a sweet, fragrant blossom. But that alchemy requires heat, struggle, time, and immense courage. When you come to a true master like Jesus, you come asking for peace. You are blissfully unaware that you have approached the most dangerous man possible. You want a soft consolation, a gentle blessing to soothe your daily anxieties. But if a master gives you consolation as you are, he is behaving like your worst enemy. He would be keeping you comfortable in your spiritual disease. A true master will immediately destroy whatever false peace you possess. He will throw a sword into your neat little life. He will create chaos, conflict, and friction within you because he knows that growth happens only through friction. When water is heated to 100 degrees, a sudden miraculous mutation occurs. The liquid turns into steam. Water always flows downward. That is its basic nature. But steam rises upward into the sky, transcending the gravity of the earth. That transformation requires heat, fire. Jesus says, I have come to throw fire, sword, war. The fire he speaks of is the inner heat, what the ancient Vedic seers called tapas. It is the spiritual fire generated through intense self-awareness and inner friction. Right now, your inner fire is buried under heavy layers of cold ash. You live a lethargic, sleepy, mechanical existence. To kindle that inner flame, friction is required. Gurdjieff, one of the most remarkable masters of the modern age, used the method of friction with astonishing power. He knew that the human body and mind operate on superficial layers of energy. If you live a comfortable, mechanical life, you only use the outermost, weakest layer of vitality. But if you intentionally create friction, if you pit your conscious will against your mechanical body habits, the outer layer gets exhausted and deep, latent reservoirs of cosmic energy are unlocked. Try a simple experiment. Your body is habituated to sleeping every night at 10 o'clock. At 10 o'clock sharp, your body mechanism tells you, I am tired, go to sleep. If you sit upright and consciously decide, I will not sleep tonight, I will remain fully alert and watchful. An intense friction begins. One part of you, the mechanical body, demands sleep. Another part of you, your conscious awareness, refuses to yield. A fierce internal war breaks out. If you surrender and lie down, the body wins. Your consciousness loses and you become weaker. But if you stand firm, if you refuse to yield, suddenly at around midnight, a miracle happens. The heavy drowsiness vanishes entirely. A surge of luminous energy floods your whole system, and you feel more fresh, radiant, and awake than you do on a bright morning. Where did that sudden energy come from? It was generated through the friction between your conscious will and your physical habit. Jesus used this method of vigil in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, staying completely awake in the desert, creating maximum friction to burn away the physical identification. And his statement, "For there shall be 5 in a house, 3 shall be against 2, and 2 against 3, is an esoteric parable describing this very internal friction. Your physical body is a house inhabited by 5 indriyas, 5 senses. Your mind acts as a mechanical coordinator between these 5 separate senses. But these 5 senses are constantly competing with one another for your life energy. The eyes consume 80% of your total nervous energy, leaving bare crumbs for your hearing, touch, taste, and smell. You live almost exclusively through your eyes, while your other senses remain starved, dull, and nearly dead. When you use the sword of Jesus, you intentionally cut through your mechanical identification with these 5 senses. You create a conscious division inside. You stand back as a solitary witness and observe the body experiencing hunger, the eyes seeing beauty, the mind feeling anger, and you clearly realize, I am the witness of all these phenomena, but I am not these phenomena. The hunger belongs to the body. I am the knower of the hunger. The thought belongs to the mind. I am the observer of the thought. This is the sword of Jesus. It cuts you cleanly in two, separating the earthy mortal shell from the immortal divine witness. And when Jesus says that father shall be against son and son against father, he is revealing an inescapable truth about spiritual awakening. The moment you cease identifying with your physical body, your psychological relationship with your earthly family is radically transformed. Your biological father is the father of your physical body. Your biological mother gave birth to your physical shell, but they did not give birth to your immortal consciousness. As long as you live in total body identification, you belong entirely to the collective family, the tribe, the society. But the moment you awaken as an immortal consciousness, you are spiritually uprooted from the collective. The family and the society become terrified of a religious person, because a truly religious person can no longer be controlled, manipulated, or hypnotized by social dogmas. Society can tolerate a drunkard, a greedy businessman, or a corrupt politician, because all of them are deeply identified with the physical body and ego. They remain safe, obedient members of the insane crowd. But a meditator, a seeker who stands alone, has stepped outside the social prison. This is why Jesus says that a seeker must become a solitary. To be a solitary means to accept the ultimate truth of your existence, that in the deepest core of your being, you are utterly alone. You were born alone, you will die alone, and right now, behind all your social roles, your marriages, your friendships, and your crowd activities, your consciousness stands as a solitary, magnificent peak, like Mount Everest, rising silently into the blue sky. The ordinary mind is terrified of aloneness. It runs frantically to the marketplace, to political rallies, to noisy clubs, to cinema halls, just to lose itself in the crowd, to forget its existential solitude. But the seeker embraces his aloneness. He sees the staggering beauty, the pristine purity, the virgin innocence of his solitary center. In that inner sanctuary, no crowd has ever entered, no social conditioning has ever polluted the air. It remains eternally pure, eternally virgin. When you accept your ultimate solitude, when you stand as an unshakable, solitary peak, Jesus promises you the ultimate gift. I will give you what the eye has not seen, and what the ear has not heard, and what the hand has not touched, and what has not arisen in the heart of man. Your eyes can only see the outer material world, your ears can only hear outer physical sounds, your hands can only touch physical shapes. All your senses are turned outward. There is not a single physical sense that can turn inward to report on the soul. And even your heart, the realm of poetry, art, emotion, and romantic love, is still on the periphery of your ultimate self. Philosophers and theologians live in the head. They create complex systems of logic and arguments about God. Artists and poets live in the heart. They sing beautiful songs of devotion and romantic longing. But Jesus speaks of a realm that transcends both the head and the heart. Religion arises at a depth where all logic fails and all emotional poetry falls silent. It arises at the absolute center of pure existence, where there is no thought, no emotion, no form, only luminous, silent beingness. When you go beyond the intellectual noise of the head and the emotional turbulence of the heart, you stand in simple, unclouded beingness. That unclouded beingness is meditation. That is the secret door upon which it is written. Pull, do not push. Stop striving outward. Stop pushing against the world, and simply pull your awareness inward into the sacred, solitary shrine of your immortal self. Let us now explore the third remarkable saying, where Jesus looks upon humanity and expresses his deep, agonizing compassion for our fallen state. Jesus said, I took my stand in the midst of the world, and in flesh I appeared to them. I found them all drunk, I found none of them athirst. And my soul was afflicted for the sons of men, because they are blind in their heart, and they do not see that empty they have come into the world, and empty they seek to go out of the world again. But now they are drunk. When they have shaken off their wine, then they will repent. Jesus said, if the flesh has come into existence because of the Spirit, it is a marvel. But if the spirit has come into existence because of the body, it is a marvel of marvels. But I marvel at how this great wealth has made its home in this poverty. When an awakened master like Jesus, Buddha, or Lao Tzu looks at humanity, what does he see? He sees a world of sleepwalkers, a world of somnambulists, a planet filled with drunkards. You believe you are awake simply because your eyes are open, because you drive your car, go to your office, and talk to your family. But your awakening is a total delusion. You are moving in a deep hypnotic sleep from the moment of your birth to the moment of your death. Gurdjieff used to tell a marvelous story about a wealthy man who owned thousands of sheep. The sheep were constantly straying into the forest, getting lost, or being eaten by wolves. The owner did not want to spend money on building fences or hiring shepherds, so he decided to hypnotize his sheep. He suggested to them, "You are not sheep at all. Some of you are lions, some of you are eagles, some of you are immortal human beings, and some of you are even gods. No harm can ever touch you, and nobody is going to kill you." The sheep were completely hypnotized by these comforting thoughts. They felt so grand, so noble, and so immortal that they stopped running away. Even when the owner slaughtered several sheep every day for his dinner, the remaining sheep thought, "He is only slaughtering the ordinary sheep. I am a lion, I am an eagle, I am a god. My turn will never come." They remained completely docile, peaceful, and content in their hypnotic delusion right up to the butcher's knife. That is precisely the condition of human society. You have been auto-hypnotized by your culture, your religions, your ambitions, and your endless repetitions. How does hypnosis work? Hypnosis works through constant mechanical repetition. If a thought, a belief, or a habit is repeated to you over and over again from your childhood, it becomes an unconscious conditioning, an irresistible obsession. Modern advertising and political propaganda function on this exact psychological law. Adolf Hitler famously wrote in his autobiography that any lie, no matter how monstrous or absurd, will eventually be accepted as absolute truth by the masses if it is repeated loudly and continuously. Hitler repeated relentlessly that the Jews were responsible for all the evils of Germany and that the Nordic race was the master race destined to conquer the world. Millions of intelligent, educated Germans became hypnotized by this constant repetition and acted like bloodthirsty lunatics. You carry your own personal auto-hypnosis everywhere you go. One man is hypnotized by money. 24 hours a day his mind repeats money, wealth, profit. He can look at a glorious sunset or a beautiful garden and he sees only real estate values and financial opportunities. Another man is hypnotized by power. He dreams only of political domination, bowing down to those above him and crushing those beneath him. A third man is hypnotized by sexual obsession. Everywhere he looks, he sees only sexual objects. He carries his hypnotized mind like a lens, coloring the entire universe with his particular obsession. You have repeated your habits, your lusts, your fears, and your ambitions for so many lives that they have become compulsive karmas, deeply ingrained samskaras. Look at what you do with your life. You work frantically to accumulate wealth, status, and material possessions. But have you ever examined the utter ugliness of what you are chasing? What is political power? It is the ugliest desire to dominate, oppress, and control other human beings. Look at history's most successful politicians, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Hitler. They were ruthless, bloody maniacs. Yet, deep down, your ego secretly desires that very same power and recognition. Look at material wealth. It is built on exploitation, greed, and taking bread from the hungry. Yet, you spend your entire life chasing these cheap, transient bubbles. When the ultimate moment of death arrives, all your accumulated wealth, your social prestige, your political power, and your grand achievements will be snatched away from you in a single second. You arrived in this world with empty hands, and you will leave this world with empty hands. Nothing of this material world can accompany you past the grave. Yet, for the sake of these temporary, worthless bubbles, you sacrifice your immortal soul. You trade the eternal diamond of divine consciousness for useless pieces of broken glass. This is why Jesus says, "My soul was afflicted for the sons of men, because they are blind in their heart. Empty they have come into the world, and empty they seek to go out of the world again." You are blind in your heart. Your intellect is exceedingly sharp, clever, calculating, and cunning. It knows how to manipulate the material world and achieve outer success. But your heart is completely shut, dark, and blind. From your early childhood, your parents and teachers trained you to live exclusively in your head, because a head-oriented person can be easily integrated into the competitive, exploitative machinery of society. The society does not want you to live from your heart, because a man who lives from his heart cannot be turned into a mechanical worker or an obedient soldier. A man of the heart is filled with love, compassion, and innocence. He cannot exploit others. He cannot hoard wealth while his neighbors starve. He cannot march off to kill strangers in a war, and he cannot lie for the sake of political power. A man of the heart is an outsider, a solitary rebel in a corrupt world. Therefore, society systematically kills the heart of every child before he grows up. Your heart has been rendered blind, deaf, and silent. Because your heart is dead, you are incapable of true prayer, incapable of selfless love, and incapable of feeling the divine presence that surrounds you. You go to church on Sundays, you recite formal prayers with your lips, but it is all a mechanical performance originating from your head. Your heart remains completely empty and cold. Jesus says, I found them all drunk. I found none of them athirst. Because you are completely drunk on the cheap, toxic wine of worldly ambition, wealth, and physical pleasure. You feel no thirst for the divine wine. When a man is completely intoxicated by the material world, his spiritual thirst is utterly dormant. Only when a human being wakes up to the bitter realization that all worldly pleasures are temporary, that all material wealth is an illusion, and that death will soon reduce all his achievements to dust, only then does a deep burning thirst arise within his soul. And that spiritual thirst cannot be satisfied by anything this finite world has to offer. It can be satisfied only by the divine wine, by the eternal nectar of ultimate awareness. Jesus offers you the ultimate key to wash away your whole toxic past. When they have shaken off their wine, then they will repent. Repentance is one of the most misunderstood concepts in modern religion. The priests have turned repentance into an ugly, guilt-ridden act of self-flagellation, where you feel like a miserable sinner crying before an angry God. That is not repentance. Repentance comes from the heart, not from a guilty mind. True repentance is a sudden, luminous awakening. It is the moment when you look at your past life with absolute clarity and see the utter foolishness, the meaningless waste, the mechanical sleep in which you have lived. You realize, I have been given this majestic, divine gift of life, this sacred opportunity to awaken as a God, and I have wasted it chasing trivial, useless junk. In that moment of intense realization, your whole heart breaks open. Tears of deep gratitude and sorrow flow from your eyes. Your entire being screams out for transformation. That existential repentance acts as a supreme spiritual fire. It instantly burns away all your past karmas, all your ancient conditionings, all your accumulated sins. In a single moment of total heartfelt repentance, your soul is washed completely clean, restored to its original pristine virginity. The logical religions of the East, Jainism and classical Hinduism insist on an endless mathematical law of karma. They say that for every wrong action you have committed in past lives, you must perform a corresponding good action to balance the ledger. Because your past lives are infinite, this process of undoing karmas takes millions of lifetimes, leading to deep spiritual laziness and endless procrastination. You tell yourself, if it takes millions of lives, why hurry today? I can meditate in my next incarnation. Jesus and his master, John the Baptist, shattered this endless procrastination by declaring, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." They created an urgent, intense, existential pressure. They told humanity, you do not have infinite time to waste. This very life, this very moment is your supreme opportunity. Drop your postponement right now. When you stop postponing, when you realize that death can snatch your physical body away in the very next breath, a fiery intensity is born within you. That intensity collapses time. In that flaming moment of total presence and repentance, your entire past vanishes like a nightmare when you wake up. When you wake up from a terrifying dream in which you committed crimes, do you have to go to a dream prison to serve a sentence? No. The moment you wake up, the dream and all its actions disappear into nothingness, because they were never real to begin with. Your past unconscious life was merely a hypnotic dream. Repentance is the sudden awakening into reality. And Jesus marvels at the astonishing mystery of human existence. If the flesh has come into existence because of the spirit, it is a marvel. But if the spirit has come into existence because of the body, it is a marvel of marvels. But I marvel at how this great wealth has made its home in this poverty. Look at the miracle of your existence. You are a physical body made of dirt, bones, water, and air. A temporary, fragile, mortal shell that will soon return to the dust. Yet inside this fragile, impoverished house of dirt, the supreme, immortal, infinite light of God has made its home. The ultimate king of the cosmos is residing right inside this humble beggar's body. You carry the supreme wealth of the universe within your own chest, yet you wander through the world begging for crumbs of attention, bits of money, and temporary pleasures. You are an emperor suffering from amnesia, living like a miserable beggar. Wake up from your hypnotic drunkenness. Throw off the cheap wine of worldly ambition. Open your blind heart. Feel the burning thirst for the eternal, and claim the divine kingdom that has been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Let us now enter into the fourth profound discourse, where Jesus reveals how you can shed your artificial masks and discover your original naked face. Jesus said, "Take no thought from the morning until the evening, and from the evening until the morning, for what you shall put on." His disciples said, "When wilt thou be revealed to us, and when will we see thee?" Jesus said, "When you take off your clothing without being ashamed, and take your clothes and put them under your feet as the little children, and tread on them, then shall you behold the Son of the Living One, and you shall not fear." Human beings do not live as they truly are. You live as society demands you to be, not with your original God-given face, but with a painted false mask. That is the fundamental sickness of human consciousness. When a child is born into this world, he comes with an original face, fresh, innocent, uncorrupted, and radiant. But very quickly, the parents, the school teachers, the priests, and the politicians begin working on the child's face. They paint over the original face, forcing him to wear artificial masks suited for social utility. One single mask is not enough, because social situations change continuously. You need a massive wardrobe of false faces. Watch yourself carefully from morning to night, and you'll be astonished to observe how effortlessly and mechanically your face changes. When you see a powerful politician or a wealthy boss approaching, your face instantly assumes a smiling, humble, submissive mask. When a poor beggar or a humble servant approaches you, that submissive mask vanishes instantly, replaced by a cold, arrogant, indifferent mask. When you are angry, you wear one mask. When you are trying to seduce someone, you wear another. When you go to church, you put on a pious, holy mask. If you sit before a mirror in total silence and consciously summon all the different faces you wear throughout the day, you will be shocked to realize that you are not a single human being. You are a crowded marketplace of artificial personalities. And in this chaotic crowd of false masks, your original face has been completely buried and forgotten. In Zen Buddhism, the Master gives the seeker one supreme meditative koan. Find your original face, the face you had before your parents were born, and the face you will have after your physical body dies. That original face is your true being. It is unpainted, unconditioned, timeless, and pure. Jesus is your original face. Buddha is your original face. Holiness is not something you achieve by adding artificial virtues to your personality. Holiness is simply the discovery of your original face when all artificial masks have been discarded. When you drop all false pretenses and stand in your absolute unadorned authenticity, you are Christ. The divine glory is instantly revealed in you. Why have you accumulated all these false masks? What is the deep subconscious fear that drives you to hide your original face? The root cause is that you deep down hate yourself. Society has conditioned you from your infancy to feel guilty, sinful, ugly, and inadequate. Your parents continuously told you, don't do this, don't be like that, you are wrong, you are bad. Every natural impulse of joy, playfulness, curiosity, and bodily exploration was met with a stern no. You grew up believing that your natural self is deeply flawed and unlovable. When a person hates his own inner reality, how can he dare to reveal his true face to the world? He feels compelled to build a polished artificial persona, a mask of nobility, intelligence, morality, and piety, to hide his perceived internal ugliness from others. And because you hate yourself, you are utterly incapable of loving anyone else. How can a person who feels poisonous toward himself offer pure, unconditioned love to another? Whatever relationship you form will be poisoned at the source by your own self-condemnation. Furthermore, because you know deep down that your outer persona is a fake mask, you can never believe that anyone truly loves you. If someone expresses love for you, your insecure ego instantly suspects, he does not love me. He is merely deceived by my false mask. If he ever sees my real self, he will recoil in disgust. Thus, you become paranoid, suspicious, and incapable of deep trust. This self-hatred is the foundation of all human falsity. It is the reason why clothes became far more than a physical protection against cold and rain. They became a psychological armor to hide the body, to hide the animal, to hide the natural life force. Society teaches you to be ashamed of your animal nature. But what is your animal nature? It is your very life energy. It is your vitality, your passion, your biological roots, your natural instincts. except for your head, which functions like a calculating computer. Your entire physical body is animal. Society would be delighted if your physical body could be eliminated altogether, leaving only a obedient, manageable head. Modern culture continuously forces you to live exclusively in your intellect, completely cut off from the vibrant, living intelligence of your physical body. Look at what this body hatred has done to human love and intimacy. For centuries, religious moralists taught that physical pleasure and sexuality are sinful and animalistic. As a result, millions of human beings became sexually neurotized, stiff, and dead. A woman was taught that enjoying sexual ecstasy was wicked and prostitute like. So she learned to lie like a cold, emotionless corpse during intimacy. Love became a mechanical duty instead of an ecstatic, divine communion. When you deny your physical nature, when you condemn your biological roots, you do not become a saint, you merely become a hypocrite. You create a split in your psyche, an artificial war between your head and your body. True holiness does not come from denying or suppressing your natural instincts. It comes from accepting them, flowing with them, illuminating them with awareness, and ultimately transcending them. Transcendence is not suppression. Suppression means bypassing a natural experience out of fear and guilt, leaving it to fester in the dark unconscious. Transcendence means entering into a natural experience with full awareness, living it deeply, understanding its nature, and naturally outgrowing it just as a mature fruit falls effortlessly from the branch when it is fully ripe. This is why Jesus commands, "Take no thought from the morning until the evening, and from the evening until the morning for what you shall put on." Stop continuously planning, rehearsing, and calculating how to present yourself to the world. Stop manufacturing artificial personalities. Be simple, be authentic, be spontaneously yourself. Accept yourself in your totality, exactly as existence has created you. Celebrate your being. When you condemn any part of yourself, you are finding fault with the Supreme Creator who designed you. When the disciples asked Jesus, "When wilt thou be revealed to us, and when will we see thee?" they are operating under the foolish assumption that Jesus is hiding himself from them. But truth is never hidden. Truth is screaming at you from every ray of sunlight, every blooming flower, every breath of wind, and every beating heart. Truth is an open hand, never a closed fist. It is not truth that is hiding, it is you who are closed. Your eyes are tightly shut behind heavy layers of artificial clothes, psychological masks, moralistic guilts, and social fears. Jesus answers their question with an uncompromising condition for spiritual vision. When you take off your clothing without being ashamed, and take your clothes and put them under your feet as the little children, and tread on them, then shall you behold the Son of the Living One, and you shall not fear. To take off your clothing without being ashamed means to drop all psychological pretense, all guilt, and all self-condemnation. It means standing before existence in absolute childlike nakedness. Nakedness here does not merely refer to physical nudity. A person can join a nudist colony and remain utterly unawakened, wearing a heavy mask of rebellion and ego. Physical nudity can be just another mental calculation. True spiritual nakedness means the total absence of shame, fear, and pretense. It means accepting your physical body, your biological emotions, your thoughts, and your total being without a single trace of condemnation or division. Look at a tiny child when you take off his clothes for the first time. The child loves his nakedness. He runs, jumps, dances, and rejoices in the freedom of his body. If you force tight, restrictive clothes onto him, he resists because he feels his natural freedom being confined. But as the child grows, the parents systematically condition him to feel ashamed of his body, ashamed of his sex organs, and ashamed of his natural instincts. The child learns to wear clothes not just for warmth, but as a protective armor of shame and fear. Jesus says, "You must take those artificial clothes of social conditioning, throw them onto the ground, tread upon them like an innocent child, and step forth in total unashamed nakedness." When shame vanishes, fear instantly evaporates. Shame and fear are twin sisters. You are terrified of others because you are ashamed of what you are hiding behind your mask. You are terrified that someone will see your anger, your lust, your doubt, your weakness. But when you shed all shame, when you accept yourself totally as you are, you have nothing left to hide. When you have nothing left to hide, you become utterly fearless. In that state of fearless, unashamed, childlike nakedness, your inner eyes suddenly snap open. The heavy fog of conditioning clears away, and in that crystal clear clarity, you behold the Son of the Living One. You recognize the Christ pulsing within your own soul and within all of existence. Drop your rehearsals. Drop your artificial goals. Stop trying to force yourself into rigid moralistic boxes of shoulds and should nots. Trust the intelligence of existence that created you. If anger arises, observe it without judgment. If desire arises, illuminate it with awareness. Allow your life force to flow spontaneously like a wild mountain river toward the ocean. When you surrender your artificial masks and trust the flow of reality, the doors of paradise, which were closed by shame and fear, instantly swing wide open. Now, let us examine the fifth saying of Jesus, a discourse so revolutionary, so radically unsettling to organized religious institutions, that the church theologians intentionally excluded it from the official authorized Bibles for centuries. Jesus said to them, "If you fast, you will beget sin for yourselves, and if you pray, you will be condemned, and if you give alms, you will do evil to your spirits. And if you go into any land and wander in the regions, if they receive you, eat what they set before you and heal the sick among them. For what goes into your mouth will not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth, that is what will defile you." When the Orthodox priests and religious authorities heard these words, they were utterly horrified. Fasting is turned into sin. Prayer leads to condemnation. Giving charity to the poor does evil to your spirit. To the conventional religious mind, these statements sound totally insane, sacrilegious, and anti-religious. It was precisely because of statements like these that the religious hierarchy of Jerusalem demanded the crucifixion of Jesus. They saw him as a dangerous, rebellious iconoclast who was destroying the very foundations of morality and organized religion. Why did Jesus utter these shocking words? Because Jesus is not concerned with outer moral actions. He is concerned exclusively with inner being. There is a fundamental, unbridgeable distinction between doing and being. Morality is concerned with outer doing, with actions, behaviors, rules, and social relationships on the periphery. Religion is concerned with inner being, with your innermost core, your consciousness, your authentic quality of presence. If your inner being is false, unconscious, egoistic, and fragmented, then whatsoever you do on the outside, no matter how holy or noble it appears, will be fundamentally corrupted and wrong. If a thief, a liar, or a hypocrite goes to church to pray, his prayer is not a holy act, it is merely a continuation of his deceit. He is attempting to manipulate and deceive God. just as he manipulates and deceives his fellow human beings. If your being is sick, your prayer will be sick. If your being is greedy, your charity will be greedy. If your being is neurotic, your fasting will be neurotic. Let us decode each of these strange declarations to understand the profound spiritual psychology behind them. First, if you fast, you will beget sin for yourselves. Why would fasting be a sin? To understand this, you must look at the psychological mechanics of the human mind. The mind always operates in neurotic extremes. It is incapable of remaining in the balanced center. A person who is deeply obsessed with food, who overeats, gluttonously indulging his physical body day after day, eventually becomes fed up and disgusted with his own behavior. Because the mind cannot find balance in the middle, it swings like a clock's pendulum to the exact opposite extreme. It decides to fast. Now, the glutton becomes an ascetic faster. But has his mind changed? Not at all. When he was overeating, he was obsessively thinking about food 24 hours a day. Now that he is starving himself on a severe fast, he is still obsessively thinking about food 24 hours a day. In fact, during a fast, his food obsession becomes 10 times more intense. Every dream, every thought, every fantasy revolves around meals and dishes. Furthermore, fasting often becomes a supreme nourishment for the ego. The faster begins to feel immensely proud, holy, and superior to ordinary people who eat daily. He looks down on others with subtle spiritual arrogance, thinking, "Look how austere, disciplined, and holy I am." This is why Jesus calls such fasting a sin. Sin, in Jesus' esoteric vocabulary, means any action that reinforces your ego, pulls you to neurotic extremes, and takes you away from balanced awareness. Fasting that arises out of an obsession with food or a desire to puff up your spiritual pride is a deep psychological sickness. Real fasting, what the ancient seers called upavas, does not mean starving the body. The Sanskrit word upavas literally means living near the self, abiding in your inner center. When a seeker becomes so absorbed in divine ecstasy that he simply forgets to eat, fasting happens as a natural, effortless consequence, not as an egoistic act of willpower. Second, and if you pray, you will be condemned. How can prayer lead to condemnation? Look at how 99% of human beings pray. You go to a temple, a mosque, or a church not out of overflowing love or silent gratitude, but like a miserable, greedy beggar. You pray to ask God for material favors, a better job, a bigger house, health for your body, success for your children, or victory over your political enemies. Your prayer is a trade, a subtle business transaction, a manipulation. If your prayer is merely a means to fulfill your worldly desires, it is not prayer at all. It is an extension of your greed. And if your prayers are not answered according to your selfish demands, you become angry, bitter, and lose faith. True prayer is never a demand, never a complaint, and never a begging bowl. True prayer is pure, unconditioned gratitude. It is an overflowing thankfulness for the sheer gift of existence, for the fact that you are allowed to breathe, to feel, to love, to behold the starry sky, and to experience the divine mystery. You ask for nothing because you realize that you have already been given infinitely more than you ever deserved. When you go to existence in total egoless gratitude, prayer is not something you perform for 10 minutes on Sunday. Prayer becomes your very breath, your continuous state of being. But if you use prayer as a greedy trick to satisfy your ego, Jesus says you will be condemned by your own falsity. Third, and if you give alms, you will do evil to your spirits. Look at what happens when an ordinary, unawakened person gives money or charity to a beggar. Does he give out of deep, selfless compassion? Almost never. He gives to feed his own inflated ego, to feel superior, noble, and generous. He loves when the beggar bows down and thanks him, reinforcing his illusion of being a great benefactor. Or he gives public donations so that his name will be carved in marble on a building, earning him social prestige and spiritual points for heaven. This kind of charity is an insult to the receiver and a poison to the giver. It nurtures your pride, hardens your ego, and creates a subtle spiritual arrogance. True giving compassion is completely different. When you feel true compassion, you feel a deep, aching oneness with the suffering of the other. You realize that you are an integral part of the society that creates poverty and misery. When you share whatever you have with a person in need, you do not feel superior. On the contrary, you feel deeply grateful that the other person accepted your gift. You do not want his thanks or his praise. You give silently, anonymously, as if your right hand does not know what your left hand is doing. Jesus then gives his disciples a revolutionary instruction for their mission in the world. And if you go into any land and wander in the regions, if they receive you, eat what they set before you, and heal the sick among them. For what goes into your mouth will not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth, that is what will defile you. Look at the extraordinary freedom and simplicity of Jesus. He tells his disciples, do not become obsessed with rigid, fanatical food rules. Do not make foolish conditions about what is pure or impure, who cooked the food, or what bowl it is served in. Whatever simple food the local people offer you with love, eat it gratefully, without creating a fuss or acting like a holy fanatic. Organized religions have always turned food into a massive spiritual obsession. In India, Orthodox priests and monks spend their entire lives worrying about food purity, who touched the food, what caste cooked it, whether a shadow fell upon it. They become so utterly absorbed in the outer mechanics of diet that their spiritual awakening is completely forgotten. Jesus cuts through this absurdity with a single brilliant stroke. What enters into your mouth, food, drink, physical matter, goes into your physical stomach and passes out into the latrine. It cannot defile your immortal soul. But that which comes out of your mouth, your speech, your anger, your hatred, your deceit, your arrogance, your judgment that reveals the true quality of your inner being, that is what defiles you. If someone insults you, he is trying to feed you with toxicity. If you respond with anger, hatred, and revenge, you have taken that toxicity into your being and multiplied it, spewing poison back into the world. But if someone spews hatred at you, and out of your centered, awakened being comes only compassion, love, and forgiveness, you have performed spiritual alchemy. You have transformed mud into a lotus flower. Stop obsessing over peripheral outer rules. Stop worrying about superficial moralistic performance. Focus your entire energy on transforming your inner quality of being. When your inner being is rooted in meditation, silence, and egoless awareness, whatsoever flows out of you will automatically be divine, holy, and pure. Let us now enter into the sixth, utterly astonishing saying of Jesus, a discourse that contains one of the most radical, illogical, and deeply comforting secrets of divine compassion. Jesus said, "The kingdom is like a shepherd who had 100 sheep. One of them went astray, which was the largest. He left behind the 99. He sought for the one until he found it. Having tired himself out, he said to the sheep, 'I love thee more than the 99. To the logical, conventional mind, this parable sounds completely insane. Imagine a shepherd who has 100 sheep resting safely in a fold. A single sheep strays away into the dark, dangerous wilderness. And what does the shepherd do? He leaves the 99 obedient sheep unattended in the dark forest and spends his entire night frantically searching through the mountains, risking his life, exhausting himself until he finds that one lost sheep. And when he finds it, he places it tenderly upon his shoulders, carries it home, calls his friends to celebrate, and tells the lost sheep, "I love you more than the 99 who never went astray." This goes against all human logic, all conventional morality, and all standard concepts of justice. A human judge or a moralistic priest operates strictly on the cold arithmetic of justice. The good, obedient sheep who stayed in the fold should be rewarded and praised, while the rebellious sinner who went astray should be severely punished, thrown into hell, and cast out forever. If God operated like a human judge, there would be no such thing as divine grace or unconditional love. Justice is a cold, calculating concept born of the human intellect. Justice insists on conditions, rules, rewards, and punishments. But compassion is the very nature of the divine. Compassion knows no arithmetic, no conditions, and no bargaining. To understand why the shepherd loves the lost sheep more than the 99, you must understand a deep, hidden spiritual truth. Only those who possess immense energy, strength, and intelligence have the capacity to go astray. Look at the 99 sheep that remained obediently in the fold. Why did they stay? Not because they chose virtue out of deep spiritual wisdom, but simply because they were weak, fearful, timid, and bloodless. They stayed in the crowd because they were terrified of standing alone, terrified of entering the dark forest, terrified of facing the unknown. Their so-called goodness was not a positive flowering of divine strength. It was merely the negative byproduct of their cowardice and impotence. A weak person who is good simply because he lacks the courage or energy to be bad is not truly good. His goodness is a pale, lifeless, plastic flower. Give that very same good person power, money, or an opportunity where he cannot be caught, and his hidden wickedness will instantly explode into the light. His virtue was merely a mask worn out of fear of punishment. Rebellion requires immense life energy. The sinner who dares to leave the comfortable, safe fold of the crowd, who dares to defy social conventions, who dares to walk his own solitary path into the wild, unknown forest that man possesses vital cosmic energy. He is real, vibrant, and alive. Look at history. The most intelligent, energetic, and gifted human beings are often the ones who go mad or the ones who fall into deep criminality and sin. Mediocre, dull, and uninspired minds remain perfectly sane and obediently moral because they do not have enough internal fire to break through the boundary. They do not have enough energy to risk going into the deep abyss. When a man of immense, wild energy goes astray, he becomes a great sinner. But if that very same man undergoes a sudden inner awakening, his immense energy is transformed and he instantly becomes a supreme saint, a Buddha, a Christ. Look at the ancient story of Valmiki in India. Valmiki was a fierce, bloodthirsty bandit and murderer who lived in the jungle, looting and slaughtering travelers to feed his family. He possessed extraordinary strength and courage. He was fighting the whole society single-handedly. One day, the great enlightened sage Narada was walking through the forest. Valmiki jumped out with his sword and demanded Narada's possessions. Narada smiled with absolute love and said, "I have no material possessions except my inner joy. You can take my life if you wish, but tell me, why do you commit these terrible sins?" Valmiki replied, "I do it to feed my beloved wife, my children, and my old mother." Narada said, "Go home and ask your wife, your children, and your mother if they are willing to share the spiritual punishment for your sins when you stand before God." Valmiki laughed and said, "Of course they will. I do it all for them." But Narada insisted, "Go and ask them. I will tie myself to this tree and wait for your return." Valmiki ran home and asked his wife, "Will you share my sins and my punishment with God?" His wife recoiled and said, "Absurd! It is your legal duty as a husband to feed me. How you get the food is your business. I have no part in your sins." He ran to his mother and she gave the exact same answer. "I am your mother. You must feed me. I will not share your bad karma." In that single, shocking moment, Valmiki realized his absolute existential solitude. He realized that every human being is born alone, lives alone, and dies alone, and that no one can share the consequences of his actions. He ran back to the forest, fell at the feet of Narada, and said, Show me the path to the eternal. Because Valmiki possessed immense, focused life energy, his transformation was instantaneous. In a single second, the great murderer died, and the supreme enlightened sage Valmiki was born, the very sage who composed the immortal epic Ramayana. Look at Angulimala, the terrifying murderer during the time of Gautama Buddha. Angulimala had taken a vow to kill 1,000 human beings and wear a necklace made of their severed fingers. He had already slaughtered 999 people. Entire armies were terrified of him, and kings dared not enter his forest. When Buddha walked calmly into the jungle alone, Angulimala shouted from a high rock, "Stop, monk! Do not take another step, or I will cut off your head." Buddha kept walking gracefully, smiled up at the giant murderer, and said, "I stopped moving long ago, Angulimala. My mind has ceased all desires, all ambitions, and all violence. It is you who are still frantically moving. I have come so that you can fulfill your vow. Take my finger, take my head." Angulimala was thunderstruck. He had met kings, soldiers, and strong men who wept and begged for their lives in terror. He had never encountered a human being who offered his life with such radiant, fearless love. In that single electrifying moment, Angulimala dropped his sword, fell into the dust at Buddha's feet, and was transformed into an enlightened disciple. It takes immense flooded energy to go astray, and it takes that very same flooded energy to reach the ultimate enlightenment. A timid, bloodless, mediocre person who has never dared to break a single social rule cannot undergo such a radical, instantaneous transformation. He has no energy to burn. This is the secret behind Jesus' parable. The 99 sheep represent the timid, unawakened mass of humanity that moves in a collective, sheep-like crowd. They follow rules out of fear, they wear masks out of cowardice, and they have no individual soul. But the one lost sheep, the largest, the strongest, represents the brave individual who had the courage to break away from the crowd, to step beyond the safe clearing of social hypnosis, and to venture into the wild, unknown forest of individual existence. To grow into a fully awakened spiritual human being, you must first develop a sharp, crystallized, independent ego. You must stand alone, face the dark wilderness, and become an individual, separate from the collective crowd. That is what going astray means, stepping out of the sheepfold. And once you have developed a powerful, independent individuality, you can undergo the second, final step, surrendering that very ego to the divine. Surrender is possible only for a person who possesses a strong crystallized ego. How can a beggar surrender a kingdom he does not own? How can a weakling surrender a strength he does not possess? First, you must become an individual. Then you can drop your individuality into the cosmic ocean. First, you become the hard mustard seed. Then you fall into the earth and dissolve into the infinite tree. The divine is not searching for the timid, sleeping sheep huddled safely in the fold. They are not yet ready. The divine is actively searching through the mountains for the lost sheep, for the rebellious, courageous, energetic soul who has dared to stand alone in the wilderness. And when the divine finds that courageous, solitary seeker, there is immense rejoicing in heaven. The shepherd lifts the lost sheep onto his shoulders and says, I love you more than the 99 who never went astray. Be courageous. Do not be afraid to step out of the unthinking crowd. Dare to think for yourself. Dare to feel for yourself. Dare to walk your own unique, solitary path into the divine unknown. Now, let us move into the seventh luminous saying of Jesus, where he speaks of the ultimate inner treasure that no power on earth or in hell can ever destroy. Jesus said, The kingdom of the Father is like a man, a merchant who possessed merchandise and found a pearl. The merchant was prudent. He sold the merchandise and bought the one pearl for himself. Do you also seek for the treasure which fails not, which endures, where no moth comes near to devour, and where no worm destroys? Look at the extraordinary clarity of this parable. A merchant travels across distant lands, collecting vast amounts of valuable merchandise, fabrics, spices, gold, and jewels. But suddenly, in a rare market, he stumbles upon a single, priceless, magnificent pearl. A pearl of such exquisite, infinite value that it outweighs all the merchandise in the world combined. The merchant is wise, prudent, and decisive. He does not hesitate for a single second. He immediately sells all his vast merchandise, converts his entire life's savings into cash, and purchases that one single pearl for himself. Later, a sudden storm strikes at sea, and his ship sinks into the deep ocean. All the heavy merchandise carried by other merchants sinks to the bottom, drowning the owners who tried to cling to their heavy goods. But this prudent merchant carries his tiny, priceless pearl safely in his hand, swims effortlessly to the shore, and reaches his home as a rich man. This parable contains the ultimate distinction between the worldly search and the spiritual search, between the world of the many and the world of the One. When you look outward through your physical senses, you encounter the world of the many countless material objects, endless desires, multiple goals, constant changes, and infinite distractions. You spend your entire life collecting outer merchandise, houses, bank balances, cars, social titles, academic degrees, and human possessions. But you forget one fundamental law of existence. Whatever you collect on the outside remains on the outside. Nothing from the material world can ever enter into your inner being. You may own a palace with 500 rooms, 3 swimming pools, and vast estates, but inside your chest you remain just as empty, impoverished, lonely, and terrified as a beggar on the street. In fact, the more outer wealth you accumulate, the more acutely you feel your internal poverty. Why? Because the stark contrast between your luxurious outer environment and your empty inner soul becomes agonizingly clear. You cannot fill an internal spiritual void with external material objects. You cannot feed a hungry soul with paper money, brick houses, or physical fame. And why do human beings waste their entire lives frantically collecting outer merchandise? Because you exist almost exclusively in the eyes and opinions of others. Your identity is not rooted in your own self-knowledge. It is constructed entirely out of the reflections you see in the eyes of society. You want a big house, a luxurious car, and expensive clothes, not because they bring true inner peace, but because they impress your neighbors. They force other hypnotized human beings to look at you with envy and respect. You live a completely artificial proxy existence, living for the impression you make on others, while completely neglecting who you truly are. Meditation is the radical break from this madness. Meditation means closing your eyes, turning your back on the mirrors of society, and looking directly into your own internal space. When you first close your eyes and look within, you will encounter a vast, terrifying emptiness. You will feel the deep pain of a wasted, unfulfilled life. But if you do not run away back to your outer distractions, if you have the courage to sit silently in that inner space, a supreme transformation begins. That internal emptiness, which at first appeared like a dark, terrifying abyss, slowly reveals its true nature. It is not an empty void, it is the formless, eternal, divine space of pure consciousness. It is the priceless pearl. Everything in the outer world of the many is subject to constant decay. change, and death. Mountains rise and crumble into dust. Great empires flourish and vanish into forgotten ruins. Physical bodies grow young, age, and rot in the grave. Even your own thoughts and emotions are constantly shifting like restless clouds in the summer sky. Nothing in the realm of time endures. If you invest your life energy in things that are temporary, you are building your house on shifting sand. When the sudden storm of death arrives, your ship will sink, your outer merchandise will be lost, and you will be left completely destitute, weeping in terror as you are dragged into the dark void. Jesus asks you, do you also seek for the treasure which fails not, which endures, where no moth comes near to devour, and where no worm destroys? What is that indestructible, enduring treasure? It is your witnessing self, the quiet, formless awareness that sits silently behind all your thoughts, all your physical sensations, all your worldly experiences, and all your changing emotions. When you are angry, the anger is a temporary cloud. You are the witness of the anger. When you are joyful, the joy is a temporary cloud. You are the witness of the joy. When your physical body is young and strong, that is a temporary form. When your body becomes old and sick, that is a temporary form. But the inner observer, the silent, luminous witness that observes childhood, youth, old age, joy, sorrow, life, and death, that witness never changes. It was never born, and it can never die. That witnessing consciousness is the pearl of great price. It belongs to the realm of timeless eternity. No moth can devour it, no rust can corrode it, no thief can steal it, and no death can touch it. The wise merchant sells all his heavy, worldly merchandise. He surrenders his attachment to material things, drops his foolish pursuit of social prestige, releases his craving for outer validation, and invests his total life energy into acquiring this single eternal pearl of inner awareness. Look at your life. How much time do you have left? Even a simple animal knows when it is time to turn around and head back home. But you have been wandering aimlessly in foreign lands for lifetimes, knocking on strangers' doors, collecting useless junk, and completely forgetting your true home. It is time to return home. Stop chasing the rainbows of material desires. Turn your vision inward. Discover the indestructible pearl of your own witnessing soul, and claim the eternal kingdom that can never be taken away from you. Now, let us enter into the 8th and final supreme discourse, the ultimate secret of spiritual alchemy, where Jesus reveals how all internal divisions are dissolved into the non-dual ocean of divine oneness. Jesus saw children who were being suckled. He said to his disciples, "These children who are being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom." They said to him, "Shall we then, being children, enter the kingdom?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, and the female not be female, then shall you enter the kingdom." This is the absolute climax, the deepest esoteric key in the entire Gospel of Thomas. When Jesus saw innocent infants nursing at their mother's breasts, he pointed to them and said, "These infants are like those who enter the kingdom." And his disciples, taking his words literally as usual, asked, "Should we then become physical infants again to enter God's kingdom?" Jesus answers with a supreme, uncompromising blueprint of spiritual transformation. He explains precisely what he means by becoming like a child again. When you make the two one, when you make the inner as the outer and the outer as the inner, when you make the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male and the female not be female, then shall you enter the kingdom. To understand this ultimate key, you must understand the nature of human consciousness and the mechanics of division. When a ray of pure white sunlight passes through a glass prism, it is instantly fractured into 7 distinct visible colors. The white light was one, but the prism creates the illusion of the 7. Your human mind functions precisely like a glass prism. Reality is one pure, unbroken, non-dual divine consciousness. But the moment reality is filtered through your analytical mind, it is instantly fractured into dualities, into light and dark, good and evil, inner and outer, above and below, life and death, male and female. Mind cannot exist without division. Mind is a mechanism designed specifically to draw boundaries, make distinctions, and create opposites. The sharper your intellect, the more categories, divisions, and distinctions it creates. Science, which is the ultimate application of the analytical mind, dissects matter smaller and smaller until it reaches the isolated atom, the world of the infinitely many. Religion operates in the exact opposite direction. Religion discards the prism of the mind. When the mental prism is set aside, all artificial boundaries, all rigid categories, and all dualities instantly melt away. Everything meets, merges, and interpenetrates everything else. The earth meets the sky, the physical meets the spiritual, life merges into death, and the seeker realizes that there is only one unbroken, infinite reality pulsating throughout the cosmos. Look at the dualities that torment your life. You are divided between the inner and the outer. You fight against the outer material world, trying to escape into an inner spiritual sanctuary. But Jesus says, make the inner as the outer and the outer as the inner. There is no real boundary between the inner and the outer. The same divine space that expands infinitely into the starry cosmos is the very same space that shines silently inside your chest. The outer is merely the visible body of the divine. The inner is the invisible soul of the divine. When you drop your mental boundaries, the wall separating the inner and the outer collapses completely. You are divided between happiness and unhappiness, between above and below. You frantically chase happiness and try to escape unhappiness. But have you ever observed that happiness and unhappiness are two sides of the exact same coin? They are like the crest and the trough of a single ocean wave. You cannot have a mountain peak without a deep valley below it. When you pursue the peak of intense emotional happiness, you are unconsciously inviting the deep valley of depression that inevitably follows. A master, an awakened sage, does not choose happiness over unhappiness. He transcends both. He steps off the emotional roller coaster altogether and rests in an unbroken, unshakable, non-dual serenity, what the ancient seers called Ananda, ultimate bliss. Bliss is not happiness. Bliss is the quiet, luminous silence that remains when both happiness and unhappiness have been transcended. And the deepest, most fundamental, most stubborn duality in human existence is the division between male and female. You are born out of the union of two biological forces, a male father and a female mother. Therefore, every single human body and mind is inherently dual. You are not exclusively male, nor are you exclusively female. If you have a male physical body, your conscious mind functions as male, but your unconscious mind carries a powerful, living female archetype. If you have a female physical body, your conscious mind functions as female, but your unconscious carries a powerful male archetype. Because you are inwardly divided, your outer life becomes an endless, frantic search for your missing half. A man chases an outer woman, hoping she will fulfill his deep inner longing. A woman chases an outer man, hoping he will complete her life. But no outer human being can ever match the ideal archetype you carry in your unconscious. Therefore, every romantic relationship eventually encounters frustration, disappointment, and conflict. You become dependent on the outer partner for temporary moments of communion, yet you deeply resent that very dependence. You fight with the person you love because deep down you realize that no outer human being can bring you permanent wholeness. Jesus reveals the ultimate inner alchemy. When you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male and the female not be female, then shall you enter the kingdom. In India, this supreme state of non-dual integration is symbolized by the ancient archetype of Ardhanarishvara, the depiction of the divine as half male and half female merged into a single, indivisible body. How does this inner alchemy occur? How do the internal male and female energies meet and dissolve into oneness? It occurs through the science of deep meditative awareness. When a person sits in deep meditation, turning his entire consciousness inward, he ceases projecting his desires onto the outer world. He becomes aware of the subtle flow of life energy, the solar masculine force and the lunar feminine force moving within his own subtle spine. As his awareness deepens into absolute silence, these two opposing energy currents converge at the central channel at the third eye. When the masculine energy of pure witnessing consciousness meets the feminine energy of pure loving presence within your own soul, an inner cosmic marriage takes place. In that sacred internal union, an explosion of unutterable ecstasy floods your entire being. You no longer need an outer partner to feel complete. You no longer depend on external relationships for fulfillment. The man within you and the woman within you have merged into an eternal, unbroken circle of light. You are no longer male, you are no longer female. You have transcended biological duality. You have become an integrated, solitary, divine soul, a true twice born, a virgin light, an awakened Christ. In that state of ultimate non-dual oneness, all questions vanish, all doubts dissolve, all anxieties disappear, and death itself is revealed to be nothing more than a passing shadow. You realize that you were never separate from the Supreme Cosmic Source. You stand as the infinite, eternal, radiant kingdom of God itself. Drop your mental dualities. Stop dividing your life into conflict. Shed your artificial masks. Allow your individual seed to dissolve into the rich soil of awareness. Unite your inner energies into an unbroken circle of light and step triumphantly into the eternal kingdom that has been yours from the very beginning. May you all gather the supreme courage to undergo this inner crucifixion of the ego, so that you may experience the glorious resurrection of your true divine self. And so you must look at this strange saying of Jesus, one of the most puzzling statements ever uttered by any master, yet one of the most illuminated. He says to his disciples that if you fast, you will beget sin for yourself, and if you pray, you will be condemned, and if you give alms, you will do evil to your spirits. Now, if a conventional priest hears this, he will be utterly shocked. The whole structure of organized religion rests upon fasting, praying, and giving charity. If you go to the Jainas, their whole religion is rooted in fasting. If you go to the Christians, their whole establishment is built around church prayer and donations. If they hear Jesus declaring that fasting creates sin and prayer brings condemnation, they will say this man is dangerous, a destroyer of morality, a heretic who deserves to be silenced. Why did Jesus make such a radical assertion? Because he is making a fundamental distinction between doing and being. Doing belongs to your surface, to your circumference, to your relationship with others and with society. Being belongs to your innermost core, to your unconditioned subjectivity, to your essence. Morality is concerned entirely with doing, but true religion is concerned exclusively with being. As you are right now, unconscious, divided, uncentered, and caught in the grip of the ego, anything you do is bound to go wrong. The question is not what is right to do. The question is how to be right in your being. If your being is centered in truth, then whatever you do will automatically be right. But if your inner core is in darkness and confusion, then even your most holy actions, your fasting, your prayers, your charity, will merely be extensions of your unconscious sickness. Look at your prayers. When you go to a temple or a church to pray, what are you doing? You are going as a beggar. You are asking for something, for money, for health, for success, for prestige, or for a comfortable place in heaven. Your prayer is not an end in itself. It is a cunning means to achieve an outer result. You are trying to manipulate God. If your desires are not fulfilled, you drop the prayer and say it is useless. That is not prayer at all. It is business. It is a bargain. It is pure greed. True prayer can never be a means to an end. True prayer is love. It is an end in itself. You do not love a person to gain a financial profit. You love simply because love is intrinsically ecstatic. In the same way, true prayer is an overflowing gratitude. It is a silent thankfulness to existence for the sheer gift of life, for the opportunity to breathe, to feel, to see the morning sun, and to experience consciousness. You do not ask for anything because you realize you have already received far more than you ever earned or deserved. When prayer arises out of egoless gratitude, it is holy. But when you pray out of greed and fear, Jesus says you will be condemned by your own falsity. Look at your fasting. Why do people fast? The human mind always moves in extreme opposites. A person who is obsessed with food, who overeats gluttonously, eventually becomes fed up and disgusted with himself. Because the mind cannot stay in the quiet middle, it swings to the opposite extreme and begins to fast. But has the mind changed? Not at all. When he was overeating, he was thinking about food 24 hours a day. Now that he is starving himself, he is still thinking about food 24 hours a day. In fact, his obsession with food has become far more acute. Every dream, every thought, every fantasy revolves around meals. Moreover, fasting gives a tremendous boost to the ego. The faster begins to feel immensely righteous, holy, and superior to ordinary people who eat daily. He looks down upon others with subtle spiritual pride. This is why Jesus calls such fasting a sin. Sin simply means any action that moves you to an extreme, feeds your ego, and takes you away from balanced awareness. True fasting, what in Sanskrit is called upavas, has nothing to do with starving the body. Upavas literally means living near yourself, abiding in your inner center. When a seeker becomes so absorbed in divine meditation that he simply forgets the physical body, fasting happens as a natural consequence, not as a forced egoistic effort. And look at your charity, your giving of alms. When you give a few coins to a beggar, why do you give? Is it out of true love, or is it to polish your self-image? If you are alone on a dark street and a beggar approaches, you often tell him to go away because there is no audience to admire your generosity. But if you are walking with friends or standing in a public market, you give immediately to protect your ego so that people will think you are a kind, noble soul. You use the beggar as an instrument to feed your pride, or you give donations so that your name will be written on a plaque, earning you social prestige on earth and spiritual points in heaven. This kind of charity does evil to your spirit because it reinforces the very ego that keeps you in spiritual bondage. True giving arises out of compassion, out of feeling a deep, non-dual oneness with the suffering of the other. When you feel true compassion, you do not feel superior to the beggar. On the contrary, you feel responsible and you feel grateful to the beggar for receiving your gift. You give silently, anonymously, without wanting any reward or recognition. Jesus then offers his disciples a marvelous instruction. When you go into any land and wander in the regions, if they receive you, eat what they set before you, and heal the sick among them. For what goes into your mouth will not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth, that is what will defile you. This is a breathtaking insight. Jesus is telling his disciples not to become obsessed with rigid, fanatical rules about food and purity. Do not make neurotic conditions about what is pure or impure, or who cooked the meal. Whatever simple food the local people offer you with love, receive it unconditionally. Organized religions have constantly turned food into a massive spiritual obsession. In India, Orthodox priests spend their whole lives worrying about food purity, who touched it, what caste cooked it, whether a shadow fell upon it. They become so entangled in outer dietary mechanics that their spiritual awakening is completely lost. Jesus cuts through this foolishness by reminding us that physical food enters the mouth, passes into the body, and is eliminated. It belongs to the physical world. It cannot defile your immortal consciousness. But that which comes out of your mouth, your words, your anger, your judgment, your deceit, your hatred, that carries the true quality of your inner being. That is what reveals whether you are whole or sick inside. If someone hurls an insult at you, he is offering you poison. If you react with anger and hatred, you take that poison into your being and spew it back out, defiling yourself and the world. But if someone throws hatred at a Buddha or a Jesus, and out of his centered presence comes only compassion, love, and forgiveness, he has transformed mud into a lotus flower. It happened in the life of Gautama Buddha. He was once accidentally given poisonous food by a poor devotee named Chunda. The food was a wild mushroom that had gone toxic, but Chunda had prepared it with immense love as his supreme offering. Buddha knew the food was poisonous, but he realized that if he refused it, the poor man's heart would be broken. So Buddha ate the poison silently, without a single word of complaint. When he returned to his camp, the poison began its fatal work in his bloodstream. As his disciples gathered around in grief and anger toward Chunda, Buddha stopped them and said that Chunda must be honored above all others. He told them that 2 meals in his life were of supreme spiritual merit. The first meal given by Sujata, which gave his body strength to attain enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And this last meal given by Chunda, which helped him drop his physical body and enter Mahaparinirvana. Look at the alchemy of an awakened master. Poison was given to him, but only love, compassion, and gratitude came out. If you feel a deep resonance with these insights, if your heart feels touched by this exploration of pure truth, take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel. Like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your presence here is a sacred fellowship, and if you feel called to help us carry these timeless teachings further into the world, to support the continuation of these discourses, I invite you to click the join button to become a channel member, offer a super thanks, or explore our curated ebooks linked below. Your support acts as a direct bridge for expanding spiritual light across the globe. Now, let us enter into another exquisite parable from Jesus, one that contains a secret so revolutionary that it completely upends conventional moral theology. Jesus said, "The kingdom is like a shepherd who had 100 sheep. One of them went astray, which was the largest. He left behind the 99. He sought for the one until he found it. Having tired himself out, he said to the sheep, 'I love thee more than the 99. To the logical, moralistic mind, this statement sounds entirely absurd and unjust. Imagine a shepherd who has 100 sheep. 99 sheep remain obediently inside the safe fold, while one single sheep strays away into the wild, dangerous mountains. And what does the shepherd do? He leaves the 99 obedient sheep behind in the forest and spends his entire night searching through the dark, treacherous rocks, risking his life, exhausting himself until he finds that one lost sheep. And when he finds it, he places it lovingly on his shoulders and says, 'I love you more than the 99. Human judges and priests operate on the cold, mathematical arithmetic of justice. Justice demands that the good, obedient sheep who stayed in the fold should be rewarded, while the rebellious sinner who went astray should be punished and cast into hell. But God does not operate on human justice. God operates on divine compassion. Justice is a human concept, a utilitarian social arrangement. Compassion is the very nature of existence. Justice carries conditions, rules, and calculations. Compassion is unconditional, overflowing, and free. Why does the shepherd love the lost sheep more than the 99? Because the one that went astray was the largest, the best, the most energetic. In the language of shepherds, the largest sheep means the best sheep, the one with the most vitality, the most wool, the greatest strength. Look at the 99 sheep that remained behind in the fold. Why did they stay? Not because they chose virtue out of deep spiritual wisdom, but simply because they were timid, weak, bloodless, and afraid. They stayed in the crowd because they lacked the courage to stand alone, to explore the unknown, to face the dark forest. Their so-called goodness was not a positive flowering of strength. It was merely the negative byproduct of their cowardice. A person who is good simply because he is too afraid or too weak to be bad is not truly good at all. His virtue is pale, lifeless, and false. The moment a weak person is given power or wealth, his hidden wickedness explodes instantly, because his virtue was only an armor worn out of fear. Rebellion requires immense energy. To step away from the comfortable, hypnotic crowd, to break social conditionings, to walk a solitary path into the wild unknown, that requires vital life force. The sinner who dares to defy social conventions possesses energy, fire, and intelligence. He is real, vibrant, and alive. Look at history. The most energetic, intelligent, and gifted human beings are often the ones who fall into deep criminality, or the ones who go mad. The mediocre, uninspired minds remain perfectly sane and obediently moral simply because they do not have enough internal fire to break through the boundary. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the brilliant intellects of the modern era, went mad. Vaslav Nijinsky, the ultimate genius of dance, went mad. Why do geniuses go mad while mediocrities stay sane? Because a genius possesses a flood of energy that cannot be contained within conventional boundaries. If that energy is not guided into meditation and cosmic realization, it overflows and shatters the mental apparatus. A mediocre mind has so little energy that it can easily remain contained within social rules. When a person of immense flooded energy goes astray, he becomes a great sinner. But if that very same person undergoes an inner awakening, his wild energy is transformed and he instantly becomes a supreme saint, a Buddha, a Christ. Consider the story of Valmiki. Before he became a revered sage, he was a ruthless bandit and murderer named Valya, who lived in the jungle looting and killing travelers to support his family. He possessed extraordinary courage and physical power. He was fighting the entire society single-handedly. One day, the enlightened seer Narada was walking through the forest. Valmiki jumped out with his weapon, intending to rob him. Narada looked at him with absolute love, completely free of fear, and said he was welcome to take whatever he wished. But Narada asked him a simple question. Why was he committing such terrible violence? Valmiki replied that he did it to feed his wife, his children, and his mother. Narada said to go home and ask them if they were willing to share the spiritual consequences and punishment for his sins. Valmiki laughed, confident that his family loved him. But Narada asked him to go and verify it while he waited tied to a tree. Valmiki ran home and asked his wife if she would share his sins before God. She recoiled and said it was his duty as a husband to feed her, but she had no part in his sins. He asked his mother, and she gave the same answer. In that single shocking moment, Valmiki realized his absolute existential solitude. He saw that every human being is born alone, lives alone, and dies alone, and that no one can share the consequences of one's actions. He ran back to the forest, fell at Narada's feet, and surrendered his life to the search for truth. Because Valmiki possessed immense focused energy, his transformation was total and instantaneous. The murderer died in a single second, and the great enlightened seer was born. Look at Angulimala, the terrifying murderer during the time of Gautama Buddha. Angulimala had taken a vow to kill 1,000 human beings and wear a necklace made of their severed fingers. He had already killed 999 people. Entire armies were afraid of him, and kings dared not enter his forest. When Buddha walked calmly into the jungle, Angulimala shouted from a high rock for him to stop. Buddha kept walking gracefully, looked up at the murderer, and said that he had stopped moving long ago, that his mind had ceased all desires, ambitions, and violence, and that it was Angulimala who was still frantically running. Angulimala was stunned He had met soldiers and strong men who wept in terror, but he had never encountered a human being who offered his life with such radiant, fearless love. In that single electrifying moment, Angulimala dropped his sword, fell into the dust at Buddha's feet, and was transformed into an enlightened disciple. It takes immense flooded energy to go astray. And it takes that very same energy to reach ultimate enlightenment. A timid, bloodless person who has never dared to break a rule cannot undergo such a radical transformation. He has no energy to burn. This is the secret behind Jesus' parable. The 99 sheep represent the timid, unawakened crowd that moves in sheep-like conformity. They follow rules out of fear, they wear masks out of cowardice, and they lack individual consciousness. But the one lost sheep, the largest, the strongest, represents the brave individual who had the courage to break away from the crowd, to step beyond the safe clearing of social hypnosis, and to venture into the wild forest of individual existence. To grow into an awakened, spiritual human being, you must first develop a sharp, crystallized, independent ego. You must stand alone, face the wilderness, and become an individual separate from the collective crowd. That is what going astray means, stepping out of the sheepfold. And once you have developed a powerful, independent individuality, you can undergo the second final step, surrendering that very ego to the divine. Surrender is possible only for a person who possesses a strong, crystallized ego. How can a beggar surrender a kingdom he does not own? How can a weakling surrender a strength he does not possess? First, you must become an individual. Then you can drop your individuality into the cosmic ocean. First, you become the hard mustard seed. Then you fall into the earth and dissolve into the infinite tree. The divine is not searching for the timid sleeping sheep huddled safely in the fold. The divine is actively searching through the mountains for the lost sheep, for the rebellious, courageous, energetic soul who has dared to stand alone. And when the divine finds that courageous seeker, there is immense rejoicing. The shepherd lifts the lost sheep onto his shoulders and says, I love thee more than the 99. Do not be afraid to step out of the unthinking crowd. Dare to think for yourself. Dare to feel for yourself. Dare to walk your own unique, solitary path into the divine unknown. Now, let us enter into the seventh saying of Jesus, where he speaks of the ultimate inner treasure, that no power on earth can ever destroy. Jesus said, "The kingdom of the Father is like a man, a merchant, who possessed merchandise and found a pearl. The merchant was prudent. He sold the merchandise and bought the one pearl for himself." Do you also seek for the treasure which fails not, which endures, where no moth comes near to devour, and where no worm destroys? Look at the clarity of this parable. A merchant travels across distant lands, collecting vast amounts of merchandise, fabrics, spices, gold, and jewels. But suddenly, in a rare market, he stumbles upon a single priceless pearl. A pearl of such exquisite, infinite value that it outweighs all the merchandise in the world combined. The merchant is wise and prudent. He does not hesitate. He immediately sells all his vast merchandise, converts his whole fortune into cash, and purchases that one single pearl for himself. Later, a sudden storm strikes at sea, and his ship sinks into the deep ocean. All the heavy merchandise carried by other merchants sinks to the bottom, drowning the owners who tried to cling to their goods. But this prudent merchant carries his tiny, priceless pearl safely in his hand, swims effortlessly to the shore, and reaches his home as a rich man. This parable contains the ultimate distinction between the worldly search and the spiritual search, between the world of the many and the world of the one. When you look outward through your physical senses, you encounter the world of the many countless material objects, endless desires, multiple goals, and constant distractions. You spend your whole life collecting outer merchandise, houses, bank balances, cars, titles, and possessions. But you forget one fundamental law of existence. Whatever you collect on the outside remains on the outside. Nothing from the material world can ever enter into your inner being. You may own a palace with 500 rooms, 3 swimming pools, and vast estates, but inside your chest you remain just as empty, impoverished, lonely, and terrified as a beggar on the street. In fact, the more outer wealth you accumulate, the more acutely you feel your internal poverty. Why? Because the stark contrast between your luxurious outer environment and your empty inner soul becomes agonizingly clear. You cannot fill an internal spiritual void with external material objects. You cannot feed a hungry soul with paper money or brick houses. And why do human beings waste their entire lives frantically collecting outer merchandise? Because you exist almost exclusively in the eyes and opinions of others. Your identity is not rooted in your own self-knowledge. It is constructed entirely out of the reflections you see in the eyes of society. You want a big house, a luxurious car, and expensive clothes, not because they bring true inner peace, but because they impress your neighbors. They force other hypnotized human beings to look at you with envy and respect. You live a completely artificial proxy existence, living for the impression you make on others, while completely neglecting who you truly are. Meditation is the radical break from this madness. Meditation means closing your eyes, turning your back on the mirrors of society, and looking directly into your own internal space. When you first close your eyes and look within, you will encounter a vast emptiness. You will feel the pain of an unfulfilled life. But if you do not run away back to your outer distractions, if you have the courage to sit silently in that inner space, a supreme transformation begins. That internal emptiness, which at first appeared like a dark, terrifying abyss, slowly reveals its true nature. It is not an empty void. It is the formless, eternal space of pure consciousness. It is the priceless pearl. Everything in the outer world of the many is subject to constant decay, change, and death. Mountains rise and crumble into dust. Great empires flourish and vanish into forgotten ruins. Physical bodies grow young, age, and rot in the grave. Even your own thoughts and emotions are constantly shifting like restless clouds in the summer sky. Nothing in the realm of time endures. If you invest your life energy in things that are temporary, you are building your house on shifting sand. When the sudden storm of death arrives, your ship will sink. Your outer merchandise will be lost, and you will be left completely destitute, weeping in terror as you are dragged into the dark void. Jesus asks you, do you also seek for the treasure which fails not, which endures, where no moth comes near to devour, and where no worm destroys? What is that indestructible, enduring treasure? It is your witnessing self, the quiet, formless awareness that sits silently behind all your thoughts, all your physical sensations, all your worldly experiences, and all your changing emotions. When you are angry, the anger is a temporary cloud. You are the witness of the anger. When you are joyful, the joy is a temporary cloud. You are the witness of the joy. When your physical body is young and strong, that is a temporary form. When your body becomes old and sick, that is a temporary form. But the inner observer, the silent, luminous witness that observes childhood, youth, old age, joy, sorrow, life, and death, that witness never changes. It was never born, and it can never die. That witnessing consciousness is the pearl of great price. It belongs to the realm of timeless eternity. No moth can devour it, no rust can corrode it, no thief can steal it, and no death can touch it. The wise merchant sells all his heavy, worldly merchandise. He surrenders his attachment to material things, drops his foolish pursuit of social prestige, releases his craving for outer validation, and invests his total life energy into acquiring this single eternal pearl of inner awareness. Look at your life. How much time do you have left? Even a simple animal knows when it is time to turn around and head back home. But you have been wandering aimlessly in foreign lands for lifetimes, knocking on strangers' doors, collecting useless junk, and completely forgetting your true home. It is time to return home. Stop chasing the rainbows of material desires. Turn your vision inward. Discover the indestructible pearl of your own witnessing soul and claim the eternal kingdom that can never be taken away from you. Now, let us enter into the eighth, saying the ultimate secret of spiritual alchemy, where Jesus reveals how all internal divisions are dissolved into the non-dual ocean of divine oneness. Jesus saw children who were being suckled. He said to his disciples, "These children who are being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom." They said to him, "Shall we then, being children, enter the kingdom?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male and the female not be female, then shall you enter the kingdom." This is the absolute climax, the deepest esoteric key in the Gospel of Thomas. When Jesus saw innocent infants nursing at their mother's breasts, he pointed to them and said that these infants are like those who enter the kingdom. And his disciples, taking his words literally as usual, asked if they should become physical infants again to enter God's kingdom.